Hey guys, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, the official home of power mining analysis. Earnings season continues. On today's episode, we're going to be dissecting both CORZ Scientific and Bitfarms earnings or results, in addition to some big news out from Soluna Holdings and Mara. Before we get into it, take a second, smash the like button, guys. Big help to myself and the channel. If you're not already subscribed, McNallie Money, feel free to join and let us know in the comment section below if you're currently holding any of these four stocks and which is your favorite in the Bitcoin mining sector. With that being said, let's get into today's video. All right, guys. Well, as I said in the intro, earnings season continues in the Bitcoin mining space. We've got a jam-packed episode for you today. Going to be talking about four of the miners we cover on the channel specifically. Before we do, though, we wanted to bring up a 1 month on Bitcoin. We're going to look at Ethereum next, but nice to take a little step back here, Anthony. Zoom out a little bit. You can see on both of these charts up and to the right, Ethereum much more so than Bitcoin. However, Bitcoin itself flirting back up close to the 120s, and again, starting to make a push out of this channel we've been identifying over the last few months.
Yeah, I mean, you look at this monthly chart here, and it shows that range we've talked about there, 114,000 all the way up to 118, 119,000. So it's held that really well. And I was talking to someone today about, Bitcoin price, and they said it dropped recently big. I said, well, it hasn't really dropped, not since the president, the results of the presidency came out, and since then it's just been like on an absolute move upwards. So, but it's nice to see it's in that range now. And we touched 122 yesterday, so maybe we're heading back towards that. But for me, you look at that for last month, Bitcoin's only 1.65% up. So really been in that nice band there and just waiting for the next push out of that. But for Ethereum, a totally different story. It has in recent years sort of, lagged behind Bitcoin a bit, but we're starting to see now some real impetus in the Ethereum, with a lot of these treasury companies coming out in favor of having Ethereum on the balance sheets and not Bitcoin. And one of our friends, Sam Tabar, the CEO of Bit Digital, he's gone exactly 180-degree turnaround. He sold the Bitcoin holdings, or the company sold the Bitcoin holdings and put it straight into Ethereum. So this last month has been like literally one update after another every day. And, with the likes of BitMine, who are effectively going to reach the 1 million Ethereum in their treasury in a very short space of time. Let's see what happens in that sector as well. But you can see here 50% increase over the last month. As you see there, the price rising towards 4.5. This is getting close to all-time high for Ethereum as well. So both coins in a strong position at the moment. Ethereum looks to have the edge during the current month, but we know Bitcoin's strong over a longer period.
Yeah, we certainly do. And some of the ATM issuances I've seen on the Ethereum treasury side are absolutely insane. The amount of money these companies are raising. We've had to stop covering that on the channel because there's so many companies doing these raises for Bitcoin and Ethereum. We can't keep up, but the demand for Ethereum is there. We're seeing it obviously in the price. Now, as we move into the Bitcoin miners, you're going to see a standout on this chart. Soluna up top. We've talked about volatility of the miners. We've talked about volatility of Soluna. This company seems to like to move double-digit percentages either up or down on a daily basis. We'll come on to some of the news in a second here. Aside from Soluna, what are you seeing on the chart today?
Yeah, you're quite right to mention Soluna there. Nice, nearly 17% up as you pulled this screen print from the desk. And if you look at the volume there, 4.3 million today. The average volume for Soluna is usually quite low, 1.9 million. So already, more than double the average volume in the first couple of hours of trading. Hut's having a good day. Bitdeer. CleanSpark back above $10 again. We covered CleanSpark yesterday after I suppose to many people, the shock announcement from Zach Bradford and his resignation from the company. Riot also in positive territory. There's a few in the red. Wolf had a good day yesterday, but it's just pulled back a little bit today. Volumes, over 10 million shares traded already. And it was significantly higher early in the day, so it's just had a bit of a pullback there. And Cypher and DMG also in the red. But with Bitcoin price, it was 122 yesterday at one point, back down, and then it's back up to 119, edges on 420 there. There's a mixed bag in terms of miners today. Most are in the green, but there's a few struggling at the moment.
Yeah, we'll continue to monitor that throughout the day. You can see obviously the Bitcoin miners move quite rapidly throughout the day. We saw that yesterday trail off continually throughout trading. So interesting to see where they close out this session. Now, we just mentioned Soluna, so maybe we'll start off there today. They just announced some big news in relation to their project Kati. We've talked with John Belizaire extensively about their portfolio, about the growth of these projects, both in scale and scope. This announcement specifically talks about expanded partnership with Galaxy. Obviously, Galaxy has been making a lot of headlines recently. We've talked about some of their partnerships. So maybe you can explore this one and how HPC is actually now benefiting companies like Soluna on the hosting front.
Yeah, it is because some of the mining companies that are moving direction from Bitcoin mining towards HPC might well offload some of their mining businesses or get other partners to host miners while they utilize that power for what they believe is a better return on investment. And if you remember, Galaxy purchased the Helios site from Argo Blockchain when Argo in financial difficulty and effectively about to go into Chapter 11, but they were, that site was purchased at the 11th hour, avoiding Chapter 11 for them. And, as a host company for about 12 months, they were given their notice. And then this year, we've had the announcement from Galaxy that CoreWeave are going to put their GPUs into the Helios site there. So Galaxy getting ready for the transition of that. Obviously, they're going to have to make some refurbishments to the site there. It's a Bitcoin mining site at the moment, but it's the power that's the interesting party. And CoreWeave will obviously go into that site when it's refurbished. Galaxy now need to move their mining machines out of that site, and Soluna offer an opportunity. So Project Kati is currently in construction at the moment and will be completed towards the end of this year. And Galaxy expect to move their machines, 48 megawatts, they're going to take advantage of at Project Kati 1. And those deployments were expected to happen in Q1 and Q2 of 2026. So we're about sort of 5 months away from the end of the year, and this is great for Soluna. We've talked about how they do their projects there, and this is effectively Project Kati 1 now will be effectively nearly fully utilized, 83 megawatts in total. So this is the first customer going in there. And I'm sure we'll hear more updates, but good update today for Soluna.
Yeah, it certainly was. And we went through their power presentation that was released last week. This is an interesting company. You look at their market cap, their share price compared to the opportunity that's ahead of them. It really is a mismatch. If John and team are able to pull this off, get the revenues flowing and start to build out some of these sites as planned, this could be a real sleeping dragon here, so to speak. So keep an eye on Soluna, you guys. The next one we wanted to talk about before we get into earnings, Mara. So this was interesting timing. We've just had Salman Khan, the CFO, on the channel. We asked about HPC AI. It sounded like Mara was erring more on the supporting side of things. So using some of the power and grid in combination with these data centers to balance that power, essentially. However, they've now come out with a strong step into the HPC AI field, specifically in your neck of the woods.
So EDF are a power company that operates in the United Kingdom, but I think they're of origin from France. But obviously, a lot of these companies, operate globally. It doesn't have to operate in one country for power. A lot of companies move across borders. But this is a great opportunity for Mara. They've signed an agreement to acquire 64% in a subsidiary of EDF, a company called Exeon, a HPC and secure cloud infrastructure provider, for approximately $168 million. So that's for 64%. Now they have the opportunity to increase that stake to 75% by 2027, but that additional 11% is going to cost them 127 million investment. So a sharp premium for that additional 11%. So it'd be interesting to understand why there is such a premium for the next 11%. Exaon's partnered already with the likes of Nvidia, Deloitte, and 2CRSI, and serves enterprise and public sector clients with energy efficient, secure cloud solutions. Now, EDF will retain a minority interest and remain a client. And the deal itself is expected to close by the end of Q4, pending any regulatory approval that's required. And, having spoke to Salman on the podcast, literally a couple of weeks ago, and we mentioned about HPC and the question was, they were prepared to work with HPC companies and look at energy and load. This seems to sort of like effectively put them smack bang into the HPC business now, taking on a company that has, HPC secure cloud infrastructure. So an interesting move by Mara. And, as we spoke about, many of the other miners, 9% of the public miners in America are looking to go towards HPC. Maybe Mara thought this is an opportunity not to miss.
Yeah, and with their balance sheet, realistically, why not just enter the market through M&A like this? We had Kevin Dede on the program recently. He said Mara is actually his top pick in the space, and he indicated to keep an eye out this summer for some major announcements in the power HPC sector. So potentially this is the first of many, but a big congratulations to the team at Mara, and nice to see realistically another one of the miners transitioning into the AI realm, leaving CleanSpark or CLSK as the only independent self-mining company. So it'll be interesting to see now that Matt Schultz is at the helm if they pivot and maybe start to look at the HPC strategy as well. Now, we did pop over to the Exaon website as well. You can see fairly well established in terms of the platform, the products that they offer, cloud infrastructure. They've got custom cloud, high performance, integrated security. They've also got some quantum solutions, 3D cloud and digital twin offering. So as you say, 2 feet fully in the HPC realm now for Mara. Now, as we transition into the earnings portion of today's presentation, we'll start with Core Scientific. Obviously, a lot going on right now with this company and the CoreWeave potential transaction. We're speaking with Kevin Dede from a Wall Street perspective. What does he think the team's actually doing? And as he alluded, probably fairly busy planning for both eventual or potential outcomes here. They didn't put out a presentation. They didn't do a conference call or earnings deck, but you have managed to pull together the numbers.
Yeah, they've been extremely quiet over the last month. And to be honest with you, after that announcement, it probably is like a quiet period, really. They can't really say too much until they go to the next stage now and seek shareholder approval for this deal. And also, I'd imagine regulatory approval as well. That probably has to go, or that's probably less of an issue. But yeah, they've released their numbers today. Their total revenues, 78.6 million. Now, this has dropped from the same period of last year. They achieved 141 million. And this is predominantly because the decrease in Bitcoin mined. Bear in mind, remember last year we had a halving event, so less Bitcoin mined during the period, and also the fact that difficulty has a real impact on production as well. So as well as a halving, you've got difficulty over the last 12 months. That tells you the tale for Core Scientific. Now, in terms of gross margin, it wasn't as good as some of their peer miners. They achieved 5 million gross margin. But then once you start taking off some of the operating costs, they had an overall loss of about $936 million. Now, before you all jump for the hills and ask yourselves, well, that's a big loss. The majority of that loss itself was down to the fact that they have a number of warrants and outstanding, and these warrants carry a contingent value. So the non-cash fair value of these warrants was 910 million, and in the previous period it was 796. So that's increased in value, and that's actually has to be included in the income statement and on the balance sheet. So that was predominantly, when you look at that net loss of 936 million, 910 of it was due to a non-cash fair value adjustment. In the same way, when we look at the valuation of Bitcoin as well, that's a non-cash fair value adjustment as well. But in this instance here, these are the warrants that they hold. Remember, we talked about the CORZ W and CORZ Z warrants. A lot of shareholders still hold on to those, and so they have to be accounted for. And the only way you can account for them is through the income statement. Now, when we look at the loss itself per share, it's 4 cents per share. And then, if you look at adjusted EBITDA, which effectively looks at the company and takes away all the non-cash issues and the one-off items, they actually had a positive 21.5 million. Now, this is compared to 46 million that they achieved in the previous year, same period, but still in a positive position. In terms of liquidity, they had significant amounts of cash on the balance sheet, 581.3 million of cash, and cash equivalents of about 172 million, so a total of 754 million in cash and cash equivalents as at the end of June. So quite strong there in terms of cash. In terms of also looking at sort of liabilities to or current liabilities to current assets, they were also significantly more current assets, so they have that coverage over the next 12 months, to meet all their requirements in terms of near-term debt to be repaid. So from a self-mining perspective, they wasn't a great period in terms of cost to mine a Bitcoin, but in terms of other things that were happening, their co-location revenues actually started during the quarter. Remember, they told us in advance that May they'd start receiving payments for the Denton facility as that's being refurbished as we speak. And so total co-location revenue for that quarter was 10.6 million, up from 5.5 million in the second quarter of 2024. And again, it's down to the Denton facility. They do have a small amount of hosted revenue. That's dropping because the number of host companies, their facilities is also dropping over the period. And that was 5.6 million, which is down from 24.8 million. Remember, go back a couple of years ago, Core Scientific had a significant hosting contingent of miners at their sites. That's been dropping ever since. They were focused on self-mining because they obviously for a better return. And then since, this move to HPC with CoreWeave, they've been looking to reduce miners in certain sites to make these sites available. So you can see that number's been dropping there, and I expect that to continue to drop as we get to the end of the year, which is a time when shareholders will start to consider this offer for CoreWeave shares.
Yeah, thanks for running through the numbers, Anthony. The other thing we wanted to get an update on, this pending transaction. I know you've put together this table showing approximate value of both companies. Can you give us an update on where we stand now?
Yeah, there's been a bit more of an improvement in the CoreWeave share price in the last week or so. It's back up to $141. Remember, it got very close to $100 a share, back up to $141.65 at the time this table was produced, just before the podcast started. And if you look at that in comparison to, if the deal was agreed today, that gives the value of the contract at 7.72 billion. Now, we know on the day they agreed the contract had a value of about 9 billion. So still about $24 away from that price, $165.18, which was the effective price of agreement. But there is no collar on that price there. So if that price rises or falls, that will affect the deal from a Core Scientific perspective. Obviously, if it rises above 165, they're getting more value for their shares in terms of CoreWeave shares. And if it drops, it works the opposite. They get less value. And at the moment, it's below that number. So the indicative price at the day of the deal for Core Scientific shares was $20.40. If you look at that indicative price today, it's $17.49. So it's about $3 away. But again, it was closer to $14 last week. So we've seen some improvement in that there. We do know that CoreWeave will announce their results this week, so that'll be interesting to highlight those, and also to see if there's any liquidity in the market as maybe some of those initial founders start to sell those shares. Remember, those shares were purchased, for up to about $40 each, some maybe even significantly less than that. And with the share price there at 141, that carries a significant premium. So we might see a bit of a selling spree when the results are announced, because that's the earliest time these founders can start selling as their lockout ends.
Yeah, you're certainly right. And it'll be interesting to see. This lockup period is kind of a double-edged sword, as if earnings are positive for CoreWeave, there's not a ton of available shares on the market. So we could even see a share price spike to the upside. So all eyes on CoreWeave earnings this week. Obviously, big implications for Core Scientific. Now, in contrast to Core Scientific, Bitfarms did put out a presentation. They put out a great presentation highlighting their HPC strategy. We'll get into that in a second. But before we do, in terms of the numbers, we've got Ben Gagnon on the program next week. We can get him to go through the specifics. What caught your attention in terms of the highlights here?
Yeah, I mean, in a similar way to Core Scientific, they achieved, of a net loss. They achieved a net loss of about just under $29 million. And if you look at that from a share perspective, that's 5 cents a share. Again, that's pretty much again, most of the mining companies, all the mining companies that we've gone through at the moment, this will be the sixth one we've done, and everyone's had a net loss, even though the Bitcoin price during that period was around about $98,000, $99,000. So it has been a challenging period for them. IREN still got to release those, and that may be the one that books the trend this quarter, as they did in the previous quarter. But margin, now you've got to remember, Bitfarms and all these miners do things slightly differently. When we get to adjusted EBITDA, I think there's like 32 different versions of adjusted EBITDA. So every company will basically do their own, because adjusted EBITDA is a non-GAAP financial metric. So it's effectively another metric to help you understand how the company's doing. And every company will include certain items or exclude certain items in that adjusted EBITDA as they see fit. So remember, it's not a gap item there, so it's never going to be held. The company can't be held to that number there. It's really just a sort of like a metric that they've put together. But it just sort of highlights the value of earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization. So it takes away all those non-cash costs. And in terms of Bitfarms, they achieved $13.7 million of adjusted EBITDA. So if that's positive there, that means effectively the company can operate cash flow positive. So the business is actually generating enough cash to pay all its cash bills. That's another way of looking at it. We've mentioned that a number of times on previous podcasts there. In terms of other points that caught my attention in the subsequent events, 4.9 million of shares have been repurchased since July the 28th, which really will be great for retail investors. Now, these shares are repurchased and then cancelled, so removed. And they were purchased for a total of just over $6 million. In terms of, again, refinancing, we've talked about this, the 300 million debt financing secured from Macquarie. They've already received 50 million of that debt refinancing, and they're going to get further of that financing as they do the renders for the first part of the project there. So that will give them sufficient cash flow to get this project en route, and it's going to take over the next couple of years to get this into place.
Yeah, you're certainly right on the financing, and that's what I was going to talk about next up. If you look through this deck, you can see a noticeable portion of the slides allocated towards HPC AI. Now, we won't go through all of them, but a few that caught our attention. There's one talking about the 3 specific markets. So Pennsylvania, the PJM market, we've talked extensively about. Also the Washington and Quebec market here in Canada. So you can see a tremendous amount of interest in this Pennsylvania market. We've seen a lot of the big hyperscalers, the blue chip companies talking about getting money, capital investment into this PJM energy market. Bitfarms seems to be in the right spot at the right time.
Yeah, absolutely. And they have 1 gigawatt of pipeline of energy in Pennsylvania, which includes megawatts under management and megawatts under active development. So, and with that 90 billion emerging data center hub investment opportunity going into that region, this gives Bitfarms a real opportunity to get a piece of that funding that's going into there. We know Pennsylvania is one of the from a location perspective, one of the great places. It's got robust energy and fiber infrastructure, and also the fact that there's a strong political tailwind following this, which all lines up from. Hopefully, Ben can put some more colour to that when we speak to him on the podcast tomorrow. But it sounds like the ducks are starting to line up in Pennsylvania. Washington, 18 megawatts there, and there's already been 1 gigawatts of data centers already been built in Washington there. But that's obviously on a smaller scale, and Quebec itself, 170 megawatts of energy pipeline there, using renewable energy and robust fiber infrastructure. And there's a very large interest now surging in that region for HPC AI with increased political support. So they seem to have tapped into HPC probably at the right time. Remember, Bitfarms, like many of us, were a Bitcoin mining company. They have sites in a lot of regions outside of Canada, in terms of Argentina, in terms of Paraguay. Now, interestingly enough, they've sold their sites in Paraguay to Hive Digital, and we've talked about Hive growing their hash rate. This announcement in their earnings also is that they're ceasing to operate in Argentina. Remember, we highlighted the fact that there was issues with contracts for energy not being renewed in May to a lot of users in Argentina. So I don't believe Bitfarms have been receiving any energy since that period there. So it looks like now, I think it was 10% of their mining business. They're actually ceasing that now, and they'll move their machines out and hopefully get their, I think there's a plan to get the deposits back that they've paid for energy, and they'll get them back over the next year or so. I think there's a timeline and a payment schedule to get those back there. But that basically takes them out of South America now, and they can focus really driving what we see on these slides here in Pennsylvania, Washington, Quebec.
Yeah, you're certainly right. So interesting to see them fully exit. Ben's talked about this strategic US pivot, and they actually have a nice slide in here talking about some of these key steps. So not only has Ben and team really focused their growth pipeline on the United States, as you just alluded to, they've also committed to US GAAP conversion in terms of accounting, and set up that principal executive office in New York City, which is really the epicenter of business and seems to be becoming the epicenter of Bitcoin now as well. So some big moves made from Bitfarms and team. Again, looking forward to the conversation with Ben to get more color on there. But seems like they are going after this HPC endeavor full steam ahead. Now, let us know in the comment section below which of these companies you're personally holding, what you thought about earnings, and this big move by Mara into the HPC space. If you guys are still watching at this point, hit the like button. Feel free to subscribe, and we'll see you back here tomorrow.